Right, so we're going to be doing something that's a combination of doodle art and collage. That's really what this is all about. And so we're going to need, that's why we want this piece. Oh, stop me video. I didn't mean to do that. Let's try that again. I was trying to pin it, not stop it. That's better, right. So this is what this piece of cardboard is for. Is we're doing this sort of combination of doodle and collage, really, just to create some backdrops. So this is just a bit I took off a cardboard box. So really it doesn't matter almost what size or shape it is, just as long as it's got a bit of stiffness to it. I've also got some different bits of paper. This is quite good if you've got scraps of paper and ends of paper that you want to use up, because I'm all for economy and not wasting anything really. Also, if you've got like some watercolour paintings or something that's gone a bit wrong, you can use these for this and sort of, because we're going to chop them up. So the first thing I'm going to do is get a piece of paper. It really doesn't matter what shape or size it is, because as I said, we're going to be slicing it up later on into strips to kind of reassembling it. But it'd be quite nice. I want to think a little bit about the colours that we're going to use. So you might want to, I think for this, maybe choose 3 colours that are relatively close together on the colour wheel. So I would choose the colours that you're most drawn to. So you might be a purple person, you might be a green or a blue person. I think for this I'm going to be green and blues. It doesn't really matter. It's just nice to work with colours that you feel drawn to because it's your sort of piece of work. So we're just going to take, if you've got like an A4 sheet, you might want to cut it in half, or you can just use a couple of A4 sheets. You can even just concentrate on a bit of the paper. But to begin with, it's just going to be very, very free and abstracty in the first one. We're not thinking about achieving anything other than getting some lovely paint onto the paper. So I'm starting off with a big brush and some water just to wet down my paper. It's probably going to go bibbly and bobbly, but again, that doesn't matter. We've got hairdryers on standby to dry it off, and we'll leave the first ones to dry. This piece is quite a knobbly paper. It's got quite a thick surface to it. I've got some slightly different surfaces because I think that's quite nice too. So I'm going to do like purple, blue and green for mine because they're quite similar colours. So I'm going to start off in the blue corner. So I'm really not worrying about what I'm doing at this point. I just want to get some interesting blue onto the paper. So I can dab it, and because we've got quite a toothed paper, I get lots of nice sort of splodges happening. So I can start off with very sort of wet paint. You might just want to sweep it across the surface and see what kind of patterns you get happening. We just want to get something interesting going on the surface, so it's not too so we're just breaking it up really, because we're going to eventually be experimenting with it and sort of playing with it. So once I've got one kind of blue on, I can get another kind of blue, and maybe I'm just going to work in stripes on this one. It really doesn't matter, and the more random it is, the better it is, because as I said, we're going to kind of disassemble it and put it back together again. So just choose the colours that you think are really delicious and slap them on and see what happens to them, so you can just see a pattern forming in front of you. It's lovely because you don't have to worry about it trying to make it look like anything. It's just going to be, what's my favourite colour, what can I get it to do? So you might want to have a sort of smoothie bit, you might want to leave some bits a bit white so you've got some sort of cloudy kind of effects. I'm sticking to 2 shades of blue on this. I love this turquoise blue. Look, isn't that lovely? Well, I've just put that little bit of brush and it's really spread out. Look, if I just move that to the camera, because it's going to be easy to do that with. You can see it's really a lovely sort of little spread of just going into the grooves and the bumps on the paint, on the paper. So that's fantastic. Just trying to get some colour onto the paper and see what we can do with it. Leave some bits white if you want. But it's almost like a sort of 2 to 3 minute quick watercolour sketch. And if there's something that you do that you think works really well, see if you can remember what it is and how you did it, because you can do it again on the next one. So I seem to have got some sort of like stripe happening there, sort of. And one thing so I've got a sort of vertical and a horizontal, and then I'm going to tip this up and I'm going to add a bit more water onto the surface just to let that spread out, and I get a lovely spread happening when that paint's going to start sort of rolling down that and sort of spreading out and being really delicious. And that's all I'm going to do on this first piece. It's going to be very quick working to begin with. I'm going to put this to one side. If it's still damp when we've done the other two, we'll give them all a hair dry. So this piece, this offcut, is going over to one side, going to sit out of the way, and I get the next piece of paper. So now I've got a little A5 piece of paper that already has some blue splops on it from, this has obviously been trimmed off something else, I can't remember what it was now. So I'm going to leave those splots on there. You obviously won't necessarily have a splot, but what you just have to forgive me for cheating by having a splot ready. And again, just put some water onto the surface. And I'm going to choose a slightly different shade because I'm going to do purples now. So I'm going to go into my purple paint. So again, I'm just putting some water on first. It's a medium sort of texture paper. You can use all the same textures, and if you like doing this, you can have a go with some different texture paper at a later date. It's just an experiment and see what we can come up with. So purple paint on this purpley blue kind of colour. So I think for this one I'm just going to start with a big sweep of purple through the middle, and this is quite lovely because I've managed to get my brush into blue and a purple paint, so it's like painting with magic stripe paint. So if I put a bit of purple and a bit of blue on my brush and bring that across, you get like a slightly two-tone effect. But that's, you know, I've got a lovely big splodge at the end there. This paper's quite curly, I don't mind any of that. We're just going to see what we can get. Let's get some, so I've got a kind of starburst of that splodge appearing in between, but I'm just going to put my brush across. And if you press your brush and lift it, you get a more kind of square, or sort of like a point of colour onto the paper, onto that stripe. So you can give yourself a stripe across, and then you can come back across it and just pushing the brush. And if it's got some pigment on it, which that one didn't so much, you can get like a sort of a darker input of colour. So you've got like a sort of like a pulse of paint marks and colour coming across there. And then I'm going to, again, still going for sort of purpley blue, another stripe across there, and I've managed to dip again a brush into both purple and blue, so I get this sort of two-tone stripe effect. And then maybe once you've got your stripe sort of going across, we can turn that through 90 degrees and then take a stripe going across maybe this way, just to do, it's always that joke, isn't it, when they send the apprentice on the first day to go and get some stripy paint from the paint stores, you know, those sort of like terrible things. But this is a bit like your own stripe paint. It's one of the reasons why I quite like the pans over the tubes, is because you can do this. You can dip your brush into two squares at the same time and get this sort of effect. So there's some lovely misty kind of colours going on here. I've got some lovely points of purpley light, and so I can come back and maybe take, just with the edge of my brush, just extend some of those spots through into a line. So I can just take my edge of my brush and I'm just going through and out the other side of one of these sort of splodges that are happening there, and I can take that down kind of through there, and it's just, you can see the way it's pulling down through those spots. It's kind of done, slightly changed their shape and given them quite a nice sort of beaded effect. So I mean, this is just lovely and abstract. Move it a little bit closer so you can just see, but that's what's happened. And so I've got a nice sort of swirly blue kind of background. There's a corner here with nothing going on, so let's put a bit of pigment onto that. Let's get a really purpley bit, a purple patch as they say, and just sort of fill that in so I've got some colour. Because what I'm going to be doing is slicing these up into thin stripes, and we're going to be reassembling them and seeing what kind of patterns and shapes appear across the stripes and see how the colours change. So that's just got that corner in there, maybe this edge as well, because that's, you know, we don't want a bald patch as it were. So I'm nearly finished on that one. I've got all of this bottom edge now quite purpley and quite a lovely luxurious colour. It was such a luxurious colour, purple, it wasn't really available to most people until they invented Procreon dyes in the late Victorian age. And certainly during the medieval times, the only form of purple you could really get into textiles was indigo, or one made from a seashell. So that was why purple was reserved for the most high offices, and so only someone who was a bishop could wear purple, or a member of the royal family. So that's why bishops' robes are purple. And it was actually illegal for mere mortals such as you and I to wear purple, which is quite interesting. But then they invented this dye in about 1880, and it was suddenly opened up a world of purple clothing, and they invented the colour heliotrope, which was invented then, and it was this gorgeous purple colour. And and that's where the phrase "a purple patch" comes from, because there was literally a time where it was the latest thing, everything was purple. Right, there we go. So there's a lovely purple patch background. So I'm going to put that to dry too, and I'm going to get my final bit of paper. This just happens to be, I just went randomly into my cupboard that's absolutely stuffed full of random bits of paper, and got some paper out of it. So with this, and this is like a sort of finer grain, so we've gone through kind of like rough, medium and fine grain watercolour paper. Again, if you don't have those to hand, it's something you can play with later. For this one, just do something slightly different. I'm going to do some circles on it in pen first. So I've got a 0.5 drawing pen, and hopefully you might have something locking around that's sort of circular shape, whether it's a teacup or the inside of a sellotape roll, or your round paint tin, or a jam jar or glass or nail varnish pot, anything that is circular. They're always quite useful to have by hand. You can get these things, which are like plastic sort of circle guides. They're dead cheap, actually. You can usually find them on eBay in places, or in the works are quite good. They're like sort of stencils, and they just have a whole range of different circles, and they're quite good to get hold of because they often have lots of different shapes in. And if you want to get some very geometric shapes, they're quite handy to have around. And you know, you can buy really expensive ones and you can buy quite cheap and cheerful ones, so it's quite good. Another thing that, just on the subject of stencil things, you know when you go to reach for something and you just knock it off the shelf, it disappears down behind the back of the shelf, so you cannot access it when you want to. Yes, I had one of those moments. Come on, I'm trying to reach the last one that isn't down the back of the unit. Right, here we go. These things are great fun. These are called French curves. And back in the day when you were, my dad used to use these. He was an old school architect before we had anything digital. And these were the sort of things that you used for drawing curved lines, arcs and that sort of thing. And I always think they look like sleds. Like sort of, you know, I imagine Santa on top of that. Yeah. But they're really good just because you can do lines and curves on them. You can sort of do a line and rotate it round a point. You know, they're great. And again, you can pick these up really cheaply now. So I'm going to put a few shapes onto this paper first in pen. So we can do some circles that sort of interlock with each other. Let's throw some different sizes in. If you've got your sellotape, you can put some circles in, like sort of bubble shapes. If you've got one of these sleds, you can put in some repeated curved lines. This is quite cool because you can kind of swing them round and use them. And the idea is that we're going to throw ourselves things that we're going to come up with later, because when we put this back together later, we'll find that these shapes will appear at different parts of the finished image, and we won't know what's going to come up. And this is all about kind of giving ourselves things to think about and play with and work around, because it's always my theory that in fact the most terribly devastating thing for creativity is being told do whatever you want, because without fail your brain goes completely freezes completely and everything goes out of your head. But if I give you a thing and say do something with that, immediately your brain starts working out, oh, what could I do? Could I do this? And you get going, because I've given you a problem to solve. So this is really what we're doing the whole way through this, is giving ourselves problems to solve. So this is now going to have green paint on it. So I'm going to put, again, a wash of water. Most pens are fairly waterproof. If they're not, actually, they can be really exciting. So sometimes I will seek out pens that aren't waterproof, because then you can paint on top and the line will fuzz and it looks really delicious, and sort of sometimes the ink spreads out into almost like a rainbow effect, and it's very unpredictable, but I quite like that, and it can be really, really lovely. So because I've got some circles here, I might work with the circles. So again, wet paper, big square brush loaded with paint, but just come around the circle shape that you've given yourself, or the line that you've given yourself, or the thing, you know, it could be, you could do a load of straight lines, you could do anything really. And then I can flick away from that just to sort of bring the paint up in a kind of halo around that. And I just want to think about the shape that I've got here. How can I, some of them I'm going to ignore, some of them I'm going to go with. So let's go with that arc of that big circle. And I say it really doesn't, to say it doesn't matter at all what you do sounds quite funny, but it actually doesn't, because you'd be surprised that the thing that you pay no attention to now might well end up being a really key part of the final image. So I can sweep that sort of green around there, and then maybe come into some of these sort of almost like whiz lines I've got and go along the top of them. Who knows what this is going to look like? And this is all about sort of experimenting. So let's sweep those around there, just like that. So there's quite a lot of movement in this sort of piece already, because these lines are kind of doing a directional thing. It feels like something flying along, sort of burrowing or whooshing along. And let's take a little bit of more vapor trail off the back, but plenty of green. And it's not going to look like this when we finish. I'm getting excited about looking like a vapor trail, and it's not going to look anything like this at all when we finished. So, but this is what it's all about. It's just giving yourself something different to think about. And in that other half of the circle there, as I've got a more olivey green, I'm going to put a bit more olivey green, spring green, into that circle, just so I've got a different shade. And maybe pick that up somewhere around there, somewhere around there. Oh, let's put a little bit more than that. That looks quite good, doesn't it? That looks quite exciting. And it's going to look nothing like it when I finished with it. So, lovely. So that's got some green onto that bit there, and it's got some lines onto it there, and we're going to play with these later. So I'm going to put that one to dry. Then I want you to pick up, because we're going to keep throwing ourselves these future curveballs, one of the other pieces, and I want you to put your third colour, a little bit of your third colour into it. So I'm going back to my first blue, and you'll see that because it's had a chance to dry, the colours are usually a bit fainter at this point. I'm not going to re-wet it. I'm just going to take some green paint and just put a bit of green in it as well. Don't know to what end, but just, you know, looking at the shape that I've got, just blobbing some green paint, it's ended up being in a sort of slight kind of cross, I don't mean angry, I mean crucifix kind of feel. Just going to fill that corner in, there we go, so it's not too much like that, and let it spread a little bit into the blue. So now I've introduced a little bit of colour into the first one as well. Okay, so that is pretty much those three done as far as we're going to do with them in the painting department. And now let's have a quick look at them side by side. So we've got the purple patch, and we've got the sort of green geometric, and we've got the kind of blueness going on. Right, so the next thing is to get the hair dryers. Obviously, if you were doing this in your own time when you're not doing a tutorial, you could just do like a load of these and then, you know, go and have a nice walk, leave it in the sunshine for an hour, and then come back and carry on, so it's got time to dry naturally. But we're going to speed things up with the hair dryers, so I'm going to mute for a couple of minutes and give these a good blast on a hot setting just to dry them off, so we can then carry on working with them. So I shall see you on the other side of the hair drying. Right, so I am back now, and I have dried everything off with my hairdryer, and what we're going to do is to cut these into strips. Now, there are obviously lots of ways of cutting things into strips. You can use a guillotine if I've got one for speed, those sort of pushy side-to-side things. You can use a craft knife and a ruler, and you can also use scissors as well. So I'm going to, the best results probably would be if you had a guillotine, because you get a really smooth, sharp edge. But I'm going to assume that you haven't got one of those. So we're going to use some scissors. It would be quite good to use a ruler as well and a pencil to give us a straight line to follow. But you don't want to rule a line across your beautiful pieces of watercolour. So you flip it over to the sort of neutral side, and what's also quite good about this is you can't actually see what you're cutting out, so it helps, or you can't decide so much about what you're going to cut out, which sort of helps in the whole kind of mysterious discovering things kind of a way. So I just got a piece of a ruler here. This is a piece because it's as usual you end up with half a broken one. So you can keep them all to the same sort of size. You can make them thinner. Try and keep them roughly straight for now. Obviously, you can go and do more baroque ones at a later date, but for this one, we're going to keep them being quite sort of straight. But we want to have a range of thicknesses, so you can use some of the ruler length and then make some thinner. You can see why if you've got a sort of slicey guillotine, it makes life a lot easier to do this, because you can trim probably quite smaller than you can cut, but basically trying to keep them straight. You'll probably find that they won't be perfectly, well, mine probably won't be because I've only got a short little bit of ruler, but you only need a straight edge, so if you've got another piece of cardboard or another piece of paper, that will work perfectly well to make a straight edge. And so once you've got half a dozen or so lines per piece, you can then cut them up. If you just try and follow the line so you've got it as straight as possible, that's all we need. And we're going to have all these different sections. You could choose to cut across the short length just the same, because we can use them in different ways each time. And I managed to have run out of glue, because you know how every time you go for a glue stick, everyone uses it, and then you go to use it yourself and somebody has left the cap off and it's gone solid. So I'm going to put some double-sided tape down on my piece of card in a minute to stick it to, which is a great thing to use. The only caveat is that it does tend to stick immediately, so it's a kind of you can't change your mind deal. It's a go for it and, you know, that's it, you've made your choice kind of thing. And that's fine too. So that's my purple one cut up. So you see what we start to get are these strips that now have areas of pattern and tone and shade through them. So you should have these sort of random areas, which again, sort of interesting things can happen when we start putting them together. So that's the purple ones. Then again on this one, I could cut, because I don't want them to be a lot bigger, I think, than this. So I don't want to cut them. I think I'm going to cut. I will cut them. I was going to always cut them across and get them shorter, but I think I'm going to cut a couple of quite long ones down this sort of side, and then throw maybe some short ones into the mix. I really could use a longer ruler or a longer straight thing. Oh, there's a straight thing. Right. So I'm just going to use this edge of acrylic to use as a ruler. So I'm going to cut this longer, but just bring these down, and obviously the final look of your image will have different feelings to do depending on what colour that you've used. And you can blend more clashing colours together, of course, and you can do it in sort of shades of grey and all that sort of thing. And sometimes, you know, if you're out and about and you just see something that's a beautiful colour combination, and like an amazing sky, or the water over the sea, you see all different shades in it, or a garden with fantastic blooms, just like amazing colours. It's quite good to collect these sort of either pictures on your camera phone, or even just try and remember them. And if you think, well, I'm never going to be able to paint that, we've gone, no, you may not be able to paint it exactly, but you could collect together those unusual colour combinations and paint them as abstract watercolour backgrounds like this, and then kind of put them together afterwards. I mean, I often get obsessed with sort of colour combinations that I just want to work with all the time. And I mean, I remember going through a phase of I saw some grey granite stones, and on top of these were a most amazing growth of lichen, and the lichen was this incredible, almost like chartreuse, greeny yellow kind of colour, really vibrant against this grey stone, and it was such an unexpected colour combination. I went through a phase of just sort of painting these two together, and by doing this sort of collaging effect, you sort of can keep the two colours quite separate and yet put them together and just see how they work together. It's, you know, colour is a wonderful thing, and if you're not the world's greatest drafts person, you know, it means you can still play with colour in a way that might be denied to you trying to do more representational painting. So I think it's really lovely to be able to sort of play with colour in that way. In fact, you know, there are people whose jobs are to put together colour palettes, so spend their time researching and presenting colour combinations for manufacturers who are looking for new product colours. So that would be a job I would quite happily go for, I think. I think that's why a lot of people who are very creative but aren't necessarily drawing sort of focused are drawn to textiles, because you can use colour almost like in a painterly way, but there's maybe more control of it. Like, you can do amazing knitting and tapestries, but you've got the time then to sort of pick and choose your colours. You're not battling against a wet media or something. I think a lot of people, I know the knitwear designer Kay Fassett always spoke about how he just saw these incredible yarn colours, and he couldn't knit at all, but he just knew that he wanted to touch these colours and somehow work with them. That's where his knitting all came from. I don't know if you've heard of him, but his work is quite wonderful if you want to check it out. So here's some long pieces. So you get lovely moments like this, where you've got this edge, almost like a sort of little bit of forest kind of coming down this, and we'll see how that goes together with our purple bits. And then we've got our strange green, or whatever colour your sort of abstract bit is. So for this one, I'm going to cut it, I'm going to flip it over, I'm going to cut it sort of across this way. So I'm going to ignore the sort of two white ends. They're a bit too white and a bit too nothingy, nothing really happening there. So I'm going to get rid of those. But I want to keep this torn edge along here because I quite like torn. And another thing to do this with is to actually tear it into strips. Then you get these sort of soft edges as well, which are quite amazing to play with. But we could always tear some of these strips up later, longwise, to see how they fit together. So let's just divide this. Remember, this has got these sort of more graphic pen lines on it. So again, that's going to give us something different when it comes to the sort of pen work. So why am I using this short ruler? I should use my bit of acrylic that I just found. Could even have used the circle drawer that I found. So let's use that again just to get these last ones straight. And I quite like the fact that we're using very sort of soft watercolour that's quite fluid, and then putting it with very straight geometric lines. That somehow there's a nice synergy between having these two surfaces together, this very hard edge and this very soft misty surface. I think it's quite interesting. Hopefully it's quite interesting seeing those two together. And again, if you had like some patterned paper that was very geometric pattern, then ripping that so that your edges are very soft and torn would be a similar kind of idea, but doing it the other way around. So I'm going to get rid of this bit because it's just plain white and it's got a little bit of green on it, but it's not massively interesting. And of course you can do this kind of thing with ready patterned paper, and if you've got interesting wallpapers and things, you can sort of put them together like this and see how the patterns merge. And it's quite good fun doing it with sort of magazine pictures if people have magazines, because sometimes you get some quite strange, surreal kind of combinations of images and colours. I think it is really just collage, isn't it? But I feel there should be a colour palette collages or something. Anyway, so we're just going to cut these across. So we're going to have a range of lengths of paper and a range of colours as well. And then once you've created them, put them back together into a surface, then we're going to take our pens across the surface and find patterns and doodles on that surface and see how the change from piece to piece changes our doodling, and see how we can respond to it. Right, so now I've got my 3 different batches of colour. And I'm just going to mute so I can have a quick drink. Have they cleared everything away then?
There's nothing.
Well, there's bread and there's cheese and everything. So I didn't leave it as to cleared it all away. Right, so let me get my piece of card. So I'm just going to very quickly stick my double-sided tape on so that I've got a sticky surface. And then, so that'll give you a minute to catch up if you're still cutting bits out. And try not to stick this to the table too much. This is going to be one of those moments where we're going to get that one bit of double-sided that absolutely refuses to come up, you know, and you're sort of picking at the corner and trying to get your nail into it, and it still won't come up, but we'll see how we get on. So this is quite a good one. It's quite a wide one. I think it's originally designed for laying carpets and that sort of thing. And so you can fill up a page quite useful, and I quite like using double-sided because it's sort of it's quite quick and strong. It's quite good for constructing things, but obviously you can get the thin stuff too, but that would take a lot longer to cover a piece of card with than this much wider stuff. And at least I'm not quite like Blue Peter. I don't have to colour out all the brand names because I'm on the BBC, so, or refer to it as sticky tape because I'm not allowed to use. Not allowed to say. If you remember that, was always had to say, you know, sticky back plastic. That was a classic, wasn't it? Everything was sticky back plastic. That was the 70s. Everything was sticky back plastic. There we go. Right, so that's just stuck those down on there, and then I can peel those off.
We just use glue for ours.
Yes. I would. You just use glue, and you can sort of stick as you go, or you can put some with a stick glue. At least it's quite. You can move things around on it, so you can put it all. You put a bit down, and then you can put more if you need to. You can use PVA as well. PVA glue is one of those magic things that holds the universe together. Pretty much everything, you can do so many things with PVA. It's quite remarkable stuff, but it's quite good because you can paste it on, and it'll sort of stay tacky for a bit, and then you can stick on top of it, and you can still move things around a bit. So I'll just peel these off quickly. And as long as I don't drop this on the carpet, we'll be fine, because it won't come off, it will be completely stuck down. So there we go. And if you get, if you are using double-sided and you've got extra edges, you can then fold them back onto themselves so they don't stick too much to your work surface. But right now it's all quite sticky. Sticky. There we go. There's my sticky bit of paper. So what we're going to be doing is placing these strips of paper, almost, as I said, almost sort of like jigsawing them together on this cardboard surface, and then we're going to be drawing across it. So I'm going to start, really you just kind of have to choose one to start, and you may have more than you need, but we're going to fill the gaps in. So we stick the first one on, and then obviously we want to choose one that definitely is not attached to this, wasn't originally attached to this one, isn't from the same piece. So I've got this blue one here, purple one here, but what I want to do is where I see the shapes that I've got on this blue section, it's quite nice to try and sort of like line things up maybe and see if we can get something so that the line of the paint is kind of carrying through from stripe to stripe. So you won't be able to get it on every single bit, but you can see the way I've got this blue like vein through this piece of purple there. I've got a sort of nice splodge of blue here, so I'm going to just line that up so it sort of looks like it's going one into the other, or I could line that purple. I think the blue is going to work better, just sort of line that up. So just see if you can find some moments where the paint sort of translates across. Where you've got a gap like this, we're going to come back and fill in later with some shorter length, so don't worry about that too much right now. So I've got my purple bit there, and now I've got a green section. If you can't find any way of connecting them, that doesn't matter either, because it'll do something different there. But just things like where I've got this little line coming to the edge of that piece of paper, I'm going to line that up with that purple fuzz sort of line just kind of there. So that gives me, again, just a moment that I might be able to carry through onto the next one. And then I'm going to choose a purple one again. I don't want it to be too regular, so it's all exactly the same pattern all the way across. So I'm going to choose a purple bit here, and this one's got a bit of white, but it's got quite a dark purple edge. So let me see. Oh, look, you see the way it's got, I wonder if I can get that to sit, look, where that white is on that green. Can I get those to somehow sit? Yeah, I think if I just sort of, maybe that. So once you've got them all spread out, then so I'm going to have another look and see if I can find a different purple one. Because I want to sort of, yeah, look, oh no, look, see with this one, I've got a nice purple edge there. So I think I'm going to bring that just into that white section. So you can spread them out in front of you. You can kind of pick and choose your pieces as they go sort of across, as we sort of build this across. So I'm going to go for a blue piece here. So let me find some blue pieces. I mean, you could be completely random and just almost shut your eyes and pull out what comes out like a sort of lucky dip and, you know, sort of make yourself go with whatever you bring out. But here's a long blue strip, and there's a nice sort of like, there's a very pale white bit there, and I'm going to kind of line that up with this sort of section in here. And this is where you can see how straight or even your strips are. Because if they're not very even, you'll find that you start making a fan shape, but that doesn't matter either. So let's come into the green. I've got just this is one of these green where I've got a bit of blue, so I can match that bit of blue into there, but that green is sort of doing something different. That's it there. And now I've got that bit of green where I put it into the blue. I'm going to bring some of these lines back. But can you see, look here, I've got a sort of curve coming through that bit of green. So I'm going to pick that up with that curve of the circle that I've chopped up. There we go. And then I think purple again. Let's see what purple bits I've got available to me. Well, I've got some that I like that with that sort of cross hatch with the brush sort of marks, and that kind of fits in quite nicely to those lines coming up there. So let's attach those like that. And here's a long strip, and that's got some green and the blue in it as well. So that can fit there, I think, quite nicely. That's it, and bring that through, and then it's time for the sun suddenly come out. We're all right up until now because it's been quite cloudy. But if it hits that mirror again, and I get this strange spotlight on my workbench, we might have to nip across and shut the curtains. So yeah, I'm getting a bit of shadow. So I'm just gonna stick these last bits on, and then I'm going to just go and quickly take the mirror down so it doesn't flood the workbench. It only happens when I'm working flat like this because it's just, you know, normally if it's up and so I don't get those angles. And I want to get a piece of green in here because I haven't got, I'm running out of space. So maybe I think that one in there, just can line up with that bit of blue swirl there, that's it. Now of course I've got some ends and stuff which are still sticky and sort of free, so I now want to fit into those ends as well. So I'm going to put this thin strip of blue and white along the top there, and then I've got to think about these end bits. So you want to fill in, if you can't find something that's the same width, I don't think that's all the same colour, I think that's a massive problem. I think we'll work around that. We'll have a different sort of conjunction there as well. I'm just going to very quickly draw the curtain, so I'm getting this big splash of light through there, which is confusing everything, so I'm just going to quickly mute and do that. There you go. I hate to block out the sun. It feels really, you know, as we've had nothing but rain for about a week, it feels very wrong to somehow cut out the sun, but there we go. Right, so I just want to we want to look at the end bits and sort of fill in some extra bits that come so that we've got all drawing surface, because otherwise, like particularly because I've got double-sided down, I'm going to get terrible sticky patches if I don't do that. So, and then you can trim off any excess bits and work them into, like that white can match up with that white. If there's tiny gaps, we can live with tiny gaps. It's just we don't want big areas of brown sticky showing through. It's not very conducive to what we're doing, I think. So and of course you can also cut some of your longer leftover pieces in half and use them to infill, sort of like mosaic them in, and get them as tight as you can if possible, so they're going to have as few gaps as we've got going. That's it. So, and then I want to see if we've got any blue. Obviously I don't have a lot of blue left, but there's a bit of blue here, so let's put that. I've got a raggedy edge there though, unfortunately. I think that won't work so well next to these sides, so I'm just going to have to do purple and green so we can fit some of them in, fit them in nice and tight. Oh, I've got some blue I can, oh, they're all too short. I was going to say I've got some bits I can cut off. If I just straighten that up a bit, I can trim that edge off. You always go from thinking, oh, I've got loads of these, and then suddenly you seem to be running out, you know. So I can put that bit in there, and I can put another green one where I've got that white line. Let's put that there. Can I make those match up? Have I stuck it down too hard? No, I can just about. Oh, look, they sort of match up across there. Let's do that. And I'm going to just trim that back because I don't want that flap waving at me. There we go. And then we've got some green to fill in into that edge there. And you can see we're building up this kind of place, this sort of image that's full of moments of transition, of things moving and sort of being part and then moving away again. And it's funny how when you start first putting the watercolours down, it's all very misty, it's all very restrained and sort of classically watercolour-y. And then as you start doing this, you sort of bring a lot of dynamism into the image. They become, you know, because you have these moments of change, it suddenly becomes much more sort of lively and has a different sort of energy about it, which I think is quite interesting. So I'm going to trim off along the edge of the cardboard eventually. So I'm just doing that now so I can get some little bits off to put in the end. And can just fill in there. So I've nearly got most of mine filled. So again, I'm going to just trim off those long bits on this side, which gives me a sort of firmer edge to kind of work to. I've just got a couple more spaces on this side, really just making sure they all get filled in so I don't endlessly get my hair stuck in it and things like that. But obviously want to try and get that filled in and all the way across. And then if you've got, because I've got a slightly, shall we say, baroque piece of cardboard because it came off a cardboard box, we can go over the edge and then we can flip it over and cut away anything that's excess. So I'm nearly done sticking those bits in, and if you've got a last bit, you can always cut something to fit it so that it's sort of exactly the size that you need. Because, you know, it's your picture, you're in charge of it, so if you need something to be a certain size, you can cut it down till it is. There you go, just trim that in. Right, okay. Oh, there's one little square there, look. Let's put a little tiny shape in there. Now we've got like almost like a grid to work to. Why is that not sticking? There's no glue, there's no tape on it. We'll just leave that one. Right, we've almost got a grid to work to, and we now can make decisions about how we're going to work on top of this and whether we're going to go along with the pattern or whether we're going to do something that goes against it or something that goes on the top but is somehow changed by what's underneath. It'll make more sense in a minute, but I'm just turning this over so I can trim off. You can see it's not a very straight edge there, so I might just straighten it up so that it's slightly less wonky on this side, just because it'll slightly annoy me for being wonky. So I'm going to just true up my angles. This is quite a good way of getting a really nice strong edge to your piece. So we can take that, just knit that off. There we go. And that gives me a nice touch. And as I've got that bit there that's sort of not playing ball, I'm going to cut this side off as well with a straight edge. which so that it's, and I think it's actually quite important to keep the edges neat and straight, because it somehow makes it into a proper framed thing. It doesn't become too scrappy. I think it works quite well. Right, so there we have our kind of mixed up background, and I think it does have this sort of strange speedy kind of feel about it, as if it's moving. There's quite a lot of movement and sort of change across the surface, which I think is really nice. So I'm going to just slightly alter my camera so I can come down a bit, because I'm going to look at some of the detail, and we want to find moments on the surface that we can then doodle onto to play with the shapes that we've got here and the things that are happening on this sort of surface. So I hope that's not at too much of an angle. It's quite awkward getting the camera right. That's better, isn't it? That's a bit not so stretched out. So I have all these sort of things happening on the surface, and obviously your surface is going to be completely different, which is what's so lovely about it. But let's have a look. I think I'm going to start off with where I've got this geometric shape in here. I want to start maybe doing something with that. So I'm going to pick a drawing pen. I've got a 0.3, I think, to begin with. 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, that kind of, so you can go bigger if you want to and go thinner if you want to, you know, you didn't have to. So I can now just think about some doodle pattern coming into this sort of shape here. So I'm going to just take some rays, I think, to begin with, just quite simple, just adding into that, just a couple of lines coming out, and then one of them I'm going to take over into the purple zone that's next to it, the purple zone. That sounds quite good, doesn't it? And then I can bring this across in the same sort of way, so it's kind of just encroaching a bit on the next line, and then I'm going to come back to the circle. So that's just very simple lines into that shape, like segments. That's all. So that's just line drawing onto that, but that's just starting to add something different to that. And then let's have a look at, let's outline some of the shapes that we find. So in this next section, there's this sort of long shape here, so I can just draw around that just to define it and give it a stronger outline. And because I've got this shape here, haven't I, where it sort of come down, I can take that line point and then move that across the surface, so that it's sort of blending these two, or linking these two stripes together. And I'm just looking at what's happening on the paper and wondering what I could do next with the line. So I'm not trying to make it be anything. I'm just trying to see what shapes I've got. But I have got a sort of shape under here as well. So, and that goes down. I can see a nice connection between this edge of brushwork on this purple and then up into here. So you might be able to find a connection in the same sort of way. So we'll start by sort of seeing if we can find the bits that connect between these two surfaces. So that definitely can sort of, you know, and then we just sort of pick them out. So we're going to draw that round there. That definitely sort of links up, doesn't it? And then if I look again a bit further, there's this shape here, look, which comes down into that drawn line. So I'm just going to extend that line up into that band of purple, and maybe just go around that soft edge. Or look, if I do that, I can bring it up so that it comes up to hit that line there, and then it joins back up to that shape there. So that's kind of just connected those sort of things together. So let's see if I can find any more connection. This is what I want you to do. I want to be looking through your stripes and seeing if you can bring any lines naturally sort of growing across from one stripe to the other. See if we can make a connection between them. So, oh yes, look, this line here that I've drawn across here, if I make that a bit firmer, I can hit that edge and come round, and that sort of has got at least to that point there. And maybe this one, where I've got this curve that's appeared on this green, I can sort of hit that blue. There's a lovely sort of cloudy bit there, so I can follow that cloudy edge. we've got dog artists joining us in the background, haven't we? I can hear getting excited. And then I can continue, this line's just continuing up round that sort of blue edge there, and it's just coming across, and look, it can hit that purple edge now as well, and it can draw into that purple. And then it hits one of those geometric lines there. So it's kind of like, so you can see how now, look, that line, just by going through, is sort of creating that feel of them actually being part of the same thing again. So although we've cut them, they're all separate to begin with, and we've cut them about, they're now becoming sort of joined up together. So what have I got happening here? I've got a nice curve, and that's hitting this sort of purple there. So let's bring that, just following the edge of the paint, the little spray of paint that's on there, just following that along and just seeing where it goes and where it takes me, and then I can hit that edge, and maybe if I just draw along that line quite straight, so make that line or that cut edge part of the sort of pattern. And can I find any more bits? Let's have a look at this side. We want to have a look and see what we can find here. Ah, look, yes, look, we've got this line coming down, and then it hits this purple bank here. So we can just, and I can follow, just think of, if you don't have to think about where to go, you just think about where the paint has gone, and that's what you're drawing round. So you just take that line down through that sort of shape, and then I can see a really strong connection here, look, with that line sort of coming through. It's sort of like a weird visual crossword, isn't it? Like you're trying to find the clues that link it all together. So you just follow that down, and then to get that to go nicely into there, I can just see a slightly pale bit that I can sort of pick my way through, and then I can hit this lovely spiky edge. So that's sort of going up and down and around these sort of spikinesses, sort of in and out and along, until that can just fade away. There we go, just sort of take that down there. So there's a sort of connection coming through round there. So have we got some more? Have we got some more that we can find? And you find that initially you think, oh, I've not got very many, and then you start seeing some other ones that you, when you've seen the sort of obvious ones, you go back and, like where I've got this one here, there's a very faint white sort of change here, but I can just take a line along that edge there. You can just see it becomes more obvious what I'm doing as I kind of pick it out, and I can come along that white, and then I can just tuck into that cut line there, and then I can actually continue back down that cut line, sort of moving it along that edge all the way down that, so that's sort of become part of that little design moment there. And then there's quite a strong edge here, which is another cut line, so let's make that into a drawn line, and then we can hit that strong cut edge there, and then it can come back, and then here is a paint mark, so I can come down the paint and around that edge and sort of bring that down, and then I'm starting to see some sort of more things that connect together, and I've got all this happening along here, this very sort of fuzzy bit. So let's just come up into that and going in and out of those lovely bumpy fuzzies, and bring those all the way around all those edges. And I can come along here, and here's this lovely splodge in this sort of purple, so let's pick that out and make that stronger. And work that over those bumps and down onto that sort of cut edge. So we're starting to see these shapes sort of all growing and becoming part of it. Coming along here, and then I'm starting to find this lovely splat to go around, which is great fun. And just to bring this through, and look, I'm going to bring this line so it comes up into those pen lines, so then that's now taking that up into this side. And moving that round, and there's a curved line here, and there's some striations to bring that through, and then just picking these little moments out, and then once we feel that we've got enough of these going on, we can start putting some more pattern into these surfaces, but where we're sort of defining these areas that now cross across the borders, I think that's a really nice, because we can take our puzzle and we can put some sort of pattern elements in. Right, so I've got some areas now to work in. Now you could probably spend more time going through and finding some of these connections and seeing how they sort of fit together. But I'd quite like to do a bit where I take some pattern across two boundary lines, as it were, to see kind of how that feels, how that adds this kind of effect. So I've got this sort of area here where I've got this blue sort of shape. I'm going to just use the word shape. Blue shape coming through here, and I've got these sort of like fan shapes coming out into this sort of area. So that's somewhere that we can get some pattern happening that will sort of work into. So to begin with, we can just do some very simple diagonal kind of chevron patterns. So that's just diagonal lines drawn into that area. If you're a rulery kind of person, you can certainly get a ruler at this point and draw them quite straight. I don't mind doing them hand. I quite like them being hand drawn. So I'm going to do them just fairly evenly across that area, and then I'm going to let those ones sit inside that space. And then for the next styration, as it were, the next sort of like fan that I've got in there, I'm going to do them the other way, and I'm going to try and get them not to. It's very hard not to match them up, and if you do, you absolutely doesn't really matter, but I quite like not matching them up. It's actually quite hard when you're drawing not to match them up, because your eye kind of wants to make them match up. But this time I'm going to take these ones into this space, and once they hit this space, they're going to start turning into wiggles. So they're going to start off being all diagonal straight lines, and then they're going to become sort of like curly, swirly, and they're going to work into those sort of swirly patterns up there, and you can get them to flow across that surface as if there's nothing stopping them. So, and maybe these ones, now I've seen that, they're going to come up and they're going to hit those swirls too, and just sort of move across the surface in this same sort of way. And then I can decide, do I take them down into this little triangle here? Yes, they're going to head down into there, over that boundary point, and just sort of fill in around there. And then we'll continue this one sort of flooding up and round and disappearing into this sort of section here. And they're going to wiggle, but when they hit this more rectangular section, or more straight geometric section, they're going to start hitting that way, so they're going to become much more straight again and go into the sort of geometric bit, and this is wiggly bit geometric, there we go. And then these are going to be just quite straight, but they're going to come across the border, so you just draw across the cut line like it wasn't there. And so we're starting to define these sort of different areas like that, sort of through. And then I'm going to do this bit here in chevrons as well. So just to divide those up like that, and then same with this section. Sometimes just repeating this very simple shape, but just doing it over and over again in filling out these different areas, it can be really effective to kind of get this sort of rhythm and pattern going. And then, because they all hit this bit of green here, so this looks like a sort of wobbly territory, so as this bit of green, these chevrons hit this bit of green, they're going to again head off into some more kind of free roaming swirls and sort of wiggles kind of coming round. There we go, sort of moving in and around like that, so each one comes off and round in its own sort of path, taking those through. So as it hits that borderline, it's as if it's hit like some water again, and it becomes a ripple, whereas it was something much more solid and geometric before. And just take each one on its sort of journey across this surface. Here we go. So you can see how all of these can come and become, so this green one is going to become really kind of wiggly and soft in feel. There we go, so that's sort of coming in different ways. And then I think it'd be quite nice to get some, to show you how to do a couple of sort of maybe the more kind of doodly patterns or sort of ones into some of these areas and see how they kind of fit in. So I'm going to do one of the ones that I'm going to like a sort of, that's quite sort of floral in feel, but we're going to imagine that you sort of see a slice of it coming into this purple. So for this one, I do a dot at the centre, and it's quite useful because you can kind of plot where you want them to go by putting the dot down. And then you can do a kind of heart, not really a heart, like a three-bumped heart, sort of like as a three-bumped heart really, sort of like a shamrock sort of shape. And then you do another one, and they don't have to be the same each time, they can be different each time, they can sort of fit in different ways. So you've got, and you bring them back together at the point, so now you've got something a little bit like a flower, I suppose, but with three kind of separate petals. And then what I do is fit some teardrops into that, coming back into that centre. So you get long, and if they fit into the top of the petal, that's fine, and if they don't, that's fine too. So you just do these three or four or five, however many you can squash into that shape, like that, and it starts to become quite sort of like a little flower head, quite flowery. That's it. And then if you look around the top, you've usually got some little triangles that have appeared where the petals haven't quite matched, and that's fine, you kind of want those, and you just go round and you colour those in black, so it gives it a sort of darkness. Right, so that's one flower, not very interesting on its own. So then we do it again. So we're going to fit one into the shape again. So we do the sort of three bumped heart. It doesn't matter if they don't touch exactly, but we're going to put those sort of three round like that with a sort of centre, and then we can do long elongated drop shapes going round into each one, and you can go round sort of like the hands of a clock, as it were, or sometimes people find it easy to do like a middle one and then one either side of that, and then sort of one either side, or you can do the outside two first, and like that. There we go. And then again, just nip round, if there's any little odd bits of black, we sort of fill them in, and then we put another one in. And they're going to, but we're going to pay attention to the edge of this strip. So we're going to let them disappear off as if there was now like a strip of pattern paper that's kind of in there. So, and they kind of like squish and fit together. You can sort of squish and squash them around just to sort of fit them in, and almost any old how you fit them in doesn't really matter, but you get this nice rhythm of doing these long sort of petal shapes on this purple background, and they're squashed into that hard edge. And then if you've got a little gap in the middle, I put a circle in and then colour around that in black pen. So what you get is this little sort of like dot in the middle, dot of like, it was like a little pearl bead kind of in the middle. So you start getting those, and I just like to pack this whole kind of area with these sort of shapes fitting in into our edge and sort of squashing up against the edge of the paper, and it suddenly brings a different kind of dimension in of getting like a little bit of pattern into the surface, so it starts to look like a strip of fabric. And because it's sort of a slightly recognisable shape, it's quite interesting because your brain kind of like jumps on it and goes, oh, I know what that is, it's like a flower pattern, and then you sort of try and make sense of how it fits into the rest. It doesn't quite, and it sort of sets up an interesting, what's that bit doing there, why is that bit all sort of flowery? So ideally I would sort of spend some time putting some different sort of patterns into all of these areas, but I'm just conscious of our time inevitably running out, so I'm going to do a couple of different bits. I would ideally pack all of these into this sort of nice purple area, so they're very tightly, all this purple becomes these sort of flowery patterns, so that sort of their territory. But I want to think about some other pattern to show you for another bit. But the idea is you want to keep on just putting these sort of patterns into different areas and seeing how these images work in amongst, and we're starting to build up layers and layers. And it's given you an outline to spend time over the next week sort of sitting here just quite calmly and gently filling in little sections and seeing how they interact and where they can lead each other. So it becomes a sort of ongoing project that you can come back to. And you'll probably find that you'll be able to, like, you'll think, oh, well, I don't know what to do with this. Oh, well, I know I can do something. I can see what I can do on this little bit here, so I'll just do that bit. And then you can go away from it a bit, and you come back, and then you go, well, actually, now I've done that, but I can see I can do this bit as well. So on this one here, I think it'd be quite nice to get sort of, I feel like something curly happening sort of across here. So I'm going to put a kind of S curve that comes all the way across these boundary lines. So I'm just letting it come all the way, maybe join up, look, with that line there, because that's something to join up to, like that. So I've got, and that's going to be like a sort of spine that I can use to base a pattern on. So I can do, again, just using those sort of teardrop shapes, but just getting them to come off that in a sort of pattern, and they're going to stretch out towards some of the boundary places that you've got, and you've got lovely green ones here, and they're going to just transition into kind of blue ones as well. So now that I've got that one there, then I can build one maybe coming off this sort of way, or coming up under that S, sort of like moving through and bringing them round in sort of different curly shapes, and then maybe coming out and this way, and then maybe on this side as well. Maybe they're going to come off this side. So it's just using these same teardrop shapes, but instead of clustering them around a central circle, they're going to cluster around this sort of S spine that I've drawn, and they're going to come through and up and into these sort of areas, and just going to sort of blossom all the way through that shape. So it's coming across. This one is sort of, you know, it's like it's ignoring all these artificial boundaries, you know, and it's just going to grow through this sort of section, coming up and moving through. Now, I would love it if you would take some photographs of some of the ones that you've done in response to the classes and send them through to me, because that's the easiest way for me to demonstrate to the powers that need demonstrating that we are doing stuff, because otherwise I don't want to have to make you fill out diaries and things. But if you were able to do a bit more on this and then send me a snap through, that would be brilliant, because then I can put those into like a learning journal, and it's just a lovely record of the things that you've done. But you can see how now I've got this nice sort of like, this is coming through the sort of all the way through, and then it's sort of meeting up, it's sort of like meeting this as a different sort of boundary. So some of these boundaries we play with, and some of them we ignore, and some of them we work to. So you can do, where you've got these sort of petal shapes, you can then do some little circles in between them, like that, sort of moving through. And you can do some quite nice effects with a bit of shading as well. If you want to, you can kind of pretend like they're a bit more 3D and kind of add a few little shading lines to them to sort of like give them a bit more solidity. And then you've got areas like this, you know, which just gives you, this where you've got this, if you've got any sort of paint marks like this with this sort of crisscrossness, you can go in and just draw around some of these little white spaces and make them into a kind of pattern, see what kind of pattern they take on. Just sort of, really, it's just like giving yourself a big doodle background that does all sorts of different things and is sort of changing in these stripes. And hopefully, eventually, we can fill all of this up, taking our time just to find little moments of pattern and so forth in the doodle. And this one in particular is the sort of one that you can come into and come out of just have it, you know, where you like to have your coffee of the morning, or, you know, where you sit and watch whatever box set we're dedicating our lives to this week. And you can just sit and find little bits to sort of play with and add little shapes, and you might find little characters appear in part of it, or we just stick to little sort of patterns. Like here's like a little shape within that, so I might do a shape where I kind of follow those edges but slightly twist the pattern each time I go round as I go smaller and smaller, and that starts to make like a little spiral, and I can just draw that into a shape like that, and then that's just giving me something else that sort of changes and moves through. And I might just take one of those shapes, and it's got little lines, so just put some lines in just to shade it. And you can see how the closer you pack your lines, the darker it kind of looks and the more tonal it becomes. And maybe perhaps where some of these lines cross, I can add a little black dot, sort of just to kind of give that a different sort of feel again. And then think, okay, so if I'm going to do that maybe on all the borders, that looks quite smart, so I can come in and draw points where these lines meet and where things meet on edges, just to give that kind of different feel. And then if you have got something like a white pen, you can bring some white into some of the patterns too. So I've just got a white gel pen, and so like where you've got these sort of dark flower patterns, you can come and do a few little pale white marks of sort of like highlight down the middle of those petal shapes, and that adds again a little bit of highlight to it, and it starts making it stand out and just sort of changing the look of them, giving them a sort of slightly brighter kind of feel. You can get your gold pens and your silver pens out as well and add some highlights. But you can sort of stick in your colour range, or you could do a couple of pops of something a bit different just to alter what's happening. But really what this has all been about is to give yourself a surface that gives you things to work with without you having to almost think about what you're doing next, because this is the areas that you've been given, this is what you're working with, so you can play with these and see how what ideas these suggest to you. Moving round, so right, so we've just got a few more minutes left, so let me look at you see you can put some white into some of these. And I've got some chevrons to put into here, just to give that a different feel. And we just keep on building, we just keep on adding layers of pattern and ideas across. And if you find an idea that works, like I quite like this sort of, where I've got this little tiny bit of green showing and these sort of very close together lines, but I'm going to swap it over, so I'm going to leave that white and I'm going to put my close together lines just into that patch of green. So you can think about how when you hit a border line, is it going to change what you do? You're going to reverse the colours maybe, like seeing if it's going to give you a different idea, just so that these start all working doing different things. So if I've got, trying to see if I've got a bit where I've got a white bit next to a dark bit, yes, sort of, although it's only small, this bit down here, so I could start a curly pattern into this white section, sort of coming round like 3 sort of curlies. Let's probably get a 4th one in there, like that, and then I can get my white pen and continue them on that purple surface in white. And this one probably isn't quite showing up as much as I want. White pens are temperamental individuals. They tend to you know, they need coaxing. They're a bit stage, you know, what's the word? Stage fright. That's what they suffer from. But there we go. So I can then I can continue that curl into the purple zone, but in white, so that it's transitioning between the two, doing something different. And then I can continue that down onto this sort of purpley section, just some big curly spirals. And I can then echo that shape in the black pen on the green side, or I can just leave that off as we sort of like. So I think we will probably have to start calling that a night now, but I hope that what you've seen with this is it's given you a really interesting surface to kind of explore and doodle with. These are my acrylic paint pens. This is showing it. This is a really good white pen. They're the sort of pens, by the way, that these people sell them for drawing on stones, because they draw on pretty much anything. And they're brilliant because they do draw on pretty much anything. So I recommend those. They're quite chunky, but they're not too bad. They're not as fat as they appear. They've got a thinner point and they look right. There we go. So I've added some white in. So, and then like where you've got this, I'm just going to very quickly do this. Where you've got this spiral that I've got coming through here, again to make it pop and stand out, you put a little ball of white at the end, and then just flick a line down in the direction of the drop, and it really brings it to life. It makes it look like a little sort of carving or a piece of jewellery. So a little dot at the end and then a tail. And it's a very quick and effective way of putting a highlight onto that surface. And because this one is crashing over the borders, we do the same thing on all these as it becomes blue as well. And that's quite satisfying to do. And it just brings them to life a bit. So if you can make sure that you have a white pen for next week, as we're going to do some watercolour but with some white pen work on top as well as a black pen like this, because I think, as you can see, it is really effective, and it really helps sort of bring these shapes to life that we're doing on top. And that is sort of where we're going to leave things for tonight. So there we go. Plenty to keep you going until next week.
Yeah.
And,
True.
right, let me just